The quiet hum of the life support systems filled classroom Delta 7 as Professor Veltherum stood at the front of his advanced xenobiology class. The tall, insect-like alien's compound eyes sparkled under the artificial lights as he looked at his students. His sharp mandibles clicked together nervously as he spoke through his translation device. "Students, we have a very special guest today," the professor said, his chittering voice converted into standard galactic by the small device on his throat. "The Reformed Criminal Integration Program has sent us Kroztor, a former Vorthack assassin. He will show us hunting techniques for our studies." The moment the words left his mouth, the classroom became dead silent. 23 students from different worlds shifted in their special seats that adapted to each species' needs. The plant-like Malari students pushed themselves back in their chairs, their green leaf arms shaking with fear. The crystal beings called Quartzians made their inner light dim until they were barely glowing. The cloud-like nebulans pulled themselves into tiny, scared balls of gas. But one student was different. In the back corner of the room, Hans sat up straight in his chair. His dark human eyes were bright and curious. While every other student in the class was terrified, the human exchange student actually leaned forward in his seat. A real smile spread across his face as he heard the classroom doors make their soft hissing sound. Kroztor walked into the room like a perfect hunter. The Vorthack was huge, almost 3 meters tall, with a black shell that shone under the bright classroom lights. He had 6 arms, and sharp claws came out and went back and over again. Glowing patterns moved along his long skull like a light show. Under the clear skin of his throat, poison sacs got bigger and smaller with each breath he took. The alien students moved even further back in their seats when they saw him. Some of the Malari actually fainted, their green bodies going limp as their light patches flickered weakly. A few Quartzians started flashing their lights, so fast it looked like they might break. The nebulans became so small and tight that they looked like marbles floating in their containment fields. But Han's smile only got bigger. He reached into his bag and pulled out his datapad, ready to take notes like this was the most exciting thing he had ever seen. Kroztor's many eyes moved across the room, looking at each student. His predator instincts automatically checked each one, reading their fear like a book. Every student was giving off the smell of terror. Their hearts were beating fast. Their bodies were ready to run or hide. This was normal. This was what he expected. Until his eyes stopped on the human in the back corner. The assassin's head turned slightly to one side, confused. From a human, he smelled nothing that suggested fear. No fast heartbeat. No sweat from stress. No body language that said the student wanted to escape. Instead, the human was sitting forward like he was about to watch his favorite entertainment program. "How interesting," Hans said quietly to himself, completely unaware that the most dangerous predator in 17 star systems was staring right at him. Professor Veltherum noticed where Kroztor was looking, and his compound eyes moved between the assassin and his human student. "Ah, yes, that is Han, our exchange student from Earth. Earth is what we call a challenging world." "A death world," whispered one of Quartzians, using the common term for planets where everything seemed designed to kill its inhabitants. Kroztor's bioluminescent patterns pulsed faster. He had heard of these humans and their dangerous homeworld, but the stories always talked about how violent and aggressive they were. This one looked calm and happy. Maybe the stories were wrong. Maybe humans were just too stupid to understand danger. "Are you ready to begin the demonstration?" Professor Veltherum asked, though his voice showed he was not really ready at all. Kroztor nodded slowly, but he kept one set of eyes on the smiling human. Something felt wrong about the situation, but he could not figure out what it was. In all his years as a hunter, he had never met prey that looked excited to see him. Han pulled out his stylus and held it over his datapad, ready to write. His eyes were focused completely on Kroztor with the kind of attention most beings only gave to things they found fascinating. It was the look of a student who had just found the perfect subject for research. The rest of the class held their breath, waiting to see what the famous assassin would do. Some were probably hoping their human classmate would finally show some normal fear. Others were worried that Han was about to become a demonstration of Vorthack killing techniques. But Han just sat there smiling, waiting to learn something new about one of the galaxy's most feared predators. He had no idea that his reaction was more unsettling to Kroztor than any amount of screaming or running would have been. The assassin had spent his entire life being the thing that other creatures feared in the darkness. Today, for the first time, he was starting to wonder if he had met something that did not fear anything at all. "The wave Vorthak Hunt," Kroztor began, his deep voice making the floor shake slightly, "has made us the most feared killers in 17 different star systems." He stretched out all his claws at once. Each sharp point had a shiny coating of deadly poison. "We start with the hunt." Without any warning, Kroztor seemed to disappear completely. The bright classroom lights could not follow where he went as he moved through shadows that should not have been there. The uniform lighting in the room should have made hiding impossible, but somehow the assassin found darkness where none existed. When he appeared again, he was standing right behind a Quartzian student who was already scared. The crystal being's inner light started flashing so fast it looked like a broken light bulb. The poor student was so terrified that his whole body was shaking, making tiny crystal sounds as his parts rubbed together. "That's amazing light bending," Han said loudly, shooting his hand up in the air with excitement. "How do you change the light waves to make yourself almost invisible?" His question seemed to hang in the air like something nobody wanted to hear. Professor Veltharim's big compound eyes turned toward Han, looking shocked that any student would speak so casually. Several other students made worried noises when they heard how normal Han sounded, as if he was asking about homework instead of watching a killing demonstration. Kroztor stared at Han for a long time, his multiple eyes focused on the human student who was still smiling. "Most creatures do not ask about the technical details when they are watching a demonstration of how to kill," he said slowly. "Oh, I'm not like most creatures," Han said happily, holding his stylus ready to write on his data pad. "I think hunting adaptations are absolutely incredible. On Earth, we have animals with similar hiding abilities. Cuttlefish can change both their color and their skin texture in less than a second. Some spiders use light tricks to become almost invisible to the things they hunt." The classroom became even more quiet than before. Han did not seem to notice that everyone was staring at him. He was completely focused on Kroztor like a student who had just found the most interesting subject in the galaxy. Kroztor's poison sacs under his throat began to pulse faster. This was not normal behavior for prey. Every instinct he had developed over centuries of hunting told him that creatures should be running or hiding or at least showing fear when faced with predator. But this human was acting like he was watching an educational program. "Continue, please," Han said, his stylus ready. "I would really like to see how you track biochemical signatures in different atmospheric conditions." The assassin's bioluminescent patterns began flashing in confusion. Biochemical signatures? Atmospheric conditions? This human was asking questions that even other predators rarely thought about. It was as if Han understood hunting on a level that most beings never reached. Professor Veltharim cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps we should move on to a less interactive part of the demonstration?" But Kroztor was now curious about this strange human. He decided to continue, partly to see how Han would react to more advanced techniques. "Very well. The next phase involves tracking across vast distances." He lowered his head and took a deep breath through specialized organs in his skull. "I can follow a target's chemical trail for up to 50 standard days, even through space." 50 days? Han's eyes lit up even more. "That's incredible. Earth sharks can track blood through water from kilometers away, but 50 days through space is on a completely different level. Do you filter out background chemical noise, or do you use some kind of selective enhancement?" This time, even Kroztor seemed surprised by the question. "You understand predatory tracking?" "Well, humans are pretty good at tracking, too," Han said matter-of-factly. "We used to track animals across continents on foot. We would follow herds for weeks, reading signs that other animals couldn't even see. Of course, we didn't have your biological advantages, so we had to get creative." The other students were now staring at Han with a mixture of horror and disbelief. The idea that their friendly, helpful human classmate was casually discussing hunting techniques with a galactic assassin was more terrifying than the assassin himself. Kroztor extended his claws again, but this time it seemed more thoughtful than threatening. "Show me," he said suddenly. Show you what? Han asked. Show me these human tracking abilities. Han looked around the classroom. Well, I can tell you that 3 students skipped breakfast this morning based on metabolic sense. Professor Veltherum had Kytherian coffee about 2 hours ago, and someone in the back row is fighting off a respiratory infection but trying to hide it. The accuracy of these observations made several students shift uncomfortably. Han had just demonstrated tracking abilities that rivaled some professional hunters, and he had done it without even trying. Kroztor's head tilted further. Interesting. And you learned this how? Basic human education. Han replied with a shrug. Everyone learns tracking and observation skills. You never know when you might need them. For the first time in his long career as an apex predator, Kroztor began to wonder if he was looking at a fellow hunter rather than potential prey. Later that evening, Han was sitting in the common area of their dormitory building. He had his homework spread out on the table in front of him. Across from him sat his roommate, Day, whose gill slits on the sides of his neck were moving fast with worry. Day was a Thylorian, and his transparent chest made it easy to see his 3-chamber heart beating much faster than normal. How can you stay so calm? Day asked, his voice shaking slightly. That thing has killed hundreds of living beings. His poison can break apart molecules. Han looked up from his schoolwork. He was writing a report comparing hunting methods from different types of worlds. Breaking apart molecules? That's actually pretty common. We have lots of animals on Earth that can do similar things. You come from a death world, Day said, as if Han might have forgotten this important fact. That's true, but it doesn't mean everything is always trying to kill you, Han said, then stopped to think. Well, okay, actually most things are trying to kill you, but that's just normal life. You learn to deal with it. Day's gills moved even faster, showing how upset he was. Normal? Han, the most dangerous hunter on my home planet, is a greater spotted herbivore. It only attacks if you get too close to its favorite flower bush. Han touched his datapad, and a small holographic image appeared above the table. Let me show you something. This is what we call a great white shark. We named it that because of its white color, not because it's especially great at anything except eating other things. They can grow to be 6 meters long, bite through metal, and sense electrical signals from other living things. The 3D image slowly turned around, showing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. Day made a choking sound when he saw it. This, Han said, touching the pad again to show a new image, is a grizzly bear. They can weigh up to 300 kilograms, run 50 kilometers per hour, and their claws can cut through tree trunks. He touched the pad once more. And this is just a regular house spider that you might find in any human home. Some types can kill you in just a few minutes. These are the hunters on your planet? Day whispered, his voice barely audible. Oh no, these are just some of the animals, Han said casually. Humans are actually the top hunters on Earth. We didn't have claws that could come out or poison or really thick skin, so we had to learn to think our way through problems. Day stared at his human friend with growing fear. Han, are you saying that you could fight that assassin from today? Fight him directly? Probably not. He has much better physical abilities than I do. Han's smile never changed. But I wouldn't need to fight him face to face. That's not how humans hunt. Han touched his datapad again and showed Day an image of early humans with simple tools. See, humans learned to work together and make tools to help us hunt. We didn't try to be stronger or faster than our prey. We learned to be smarter. Smarter how? Day asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Well, we learned to track animals for days or even weeks. We would follow them until they got tired. We called it persistence hunting. We also learned to set traps and coordinate attacks. If one human couldn't handle something, we would work as a team. Han showed another image of humans using fire to drive animals toward a cliff. We learned to use our environment as a weapon. We didn't need to be the fastest or strongest. We just needed to think ahead. Day's 3 hearts were now beating so fast they looked like they might burst. You're telling me that humans became the top predators on a death world by thinking? That's right, Han said cheerfully. Every human child learns basic hunting skills, tracking, trap making, and team coordination. It's just part of growing up. You never know when you might need those skills. Need them for what? Day asked in horror. For staying alive. Han replied as if this should be obvious. Earth is a dangerous place. There are storms that can destroy cities, earthquakes that split the ground open, volcanoes that cover everything in hot rock, and animals that see humans as food. You learn to adapt or you don't survive. Day was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, he asked, "So when you were watching that assassin today, you weren't scared because he wasn't hunting me?" Han said simply. He was teaching. There's a big difference. Plus, it was fascinating to see how his species adapted to be such efficient predators. I learned a lot. But what if he had been hunting you? Han's smile became thoughtful. Then I would have treated it like any other survival problem. Assess the situation, identify weaknesses, use available resources, and think several steps ahead. He paused. That's just basic human survival training. In that moment, Day realized something that would keep him awake for many nights. His friendly, helpful roommate had just described hunting a Galactic-class assassin the same way other students might describe solving a math problem. And Han was still smiling that same calm, curious smile. The attack happened during the third class period, when most students were sitting in their lessons and the hallways were almost empty. The Purification Front, a group of extremists who hated the mixing of different species, had somehow gotten past all the station's security systems. Loud alarm sounds filled the air as armed figures wearing full-body suits rushed into classroom Delta 7. Professor Veltharum had been having a quiet discussion about how different species could help each other survive. The leader of the attackers spoke through a voice changer in a suit, announcing that they wanted to clean the galaxy of this unnatural mixing of species. 23 students and their professor suddenly became prisoners. The attackers had clearly studied their targets well. They carried different types of weapons that would work against different alien body types. They had sound weapons for the crystal students, electrical blockers for the energy beings, and regular shooting weapons for creatures made of carbon like humans. Kroztor had been watching the class as part of his program to become a better citizen. When he first tried to fight back, he took a plasma blast right in his chest. The assassin fell down hard. His body was trying to heal itself, but he was too hurt to fight effectively. All the students crowded together in fear, except for Han. The human sat quietly in his chair, looking calm, but his eyes kept moving around the room, like he was memorizing every detail he could see. "Which one is a human?" the leader asked loudly, looking at all the scared students. Han raised his hand calmly. "That's me." "Ah, the Deathworlder. You will be a perfect example of why mixing species is dangerous. Your people's violent ways have no place in civilized society." "Excuse me," Han said politely, interrupting the leader. "But can you tell me how many exits you have covered?" The question was so strange that the leader actually answered without thinking. "All of them, of course. We're not stupid." "And what about backup plans when security responds?" "We have everything completely under control." "What are you doing?" Han had stood up from his chair and was taking off his academy jacket, showing a simple black shirt underneath. "I'm just trying to understand how you planned this attack. You see, the thing about humans is that we hunt by chasing our prey for long distances. We don't hide and jump out like our friend Kroztor does." He looked toward the wounded assassin. "We like to use more systematic methods." One of the other attackers pointed his weapon at Han, but the leader held up his hand to stop him. "Let him keep talking. I want to hear what counts as smart thinking among Deathworlders. The problem with your plan," Han continued in a conversational tone, walking slowly around the edge of the classroom, "is that you think I'm the prey here." He stopped near a control panel on the wall. "But humans didn't become the top predators by being prey." The leader laughed through his voice changer. "You're one unarmed student against 6 trained soldiers with advanced weapons. What exactly do you think you can do?" "Well," Han said thoughtfully, "first I noticed that your weapons are designed for specific alien physiologies, but you only brought one type that works on humans. Second, your environmental suits limit your peripheral vision and muffle your hearing. Third, you're standing in a formation that works great in open spaces but creates blind spots in a closed room like this." As Han spoke, he kept moving slowly around the room. The attackers turned to follow him, but they were focusing so much on him that they stopped paying attention to their surroundings. Fourth, Han continued, now standing near the emergency controls. You assume that because I'm from a death world, I will be violent and unpredictable. But the thing about coming from a dangerous planet is that you learn to think before you act. Enough talking, the leader said, raising his weapon. Han's hand shot out and hit the emergency atmosphere controls. The room immediately went dark as backup lighting kicked in, bathing everything in dim red light that barely let anyone see. The fifth thing you got wrong, Han's voice came from somewhere in the darkness, is that you thought being from a death world made me the dangerous one. But humans aren't dangerous because we're violent. We're dangerous because we solve problems. What happened next took less than 3 minutes, but it felt much longer to everyone in the room. The attackers had better weapons, stronger armor, and military training. But Han had something they didn't have. He had grown up on a world where thinking 3 steps ahead was the difference between living and dying. He used the room's structure against them, turned their own equipment into obstacles, and took advantage of their belief that one unarmed human couldn't possibly be a threat. When the normal lights came back on, all 6 attackers were lying unconscious on the floor, defeated by their own weapons and equipment used in ways they had never imagined. Han stood in the center of the room, breathing a little harder than usual, but otherwise completely unharmed. He looked down at Krastor, who was staring at him with amazement and maybe a little fear. Can you move well enough to help secure the area? Han asked the injured assassin. Security should be here in about 4 minutes. 3 days after the attack, Krastor made his way through the Academy's medical wing. His wounds were healing well, thanks to his species' natural ability to recover quickly from injuries. He found Han in the recovery ward, sitting next to a young Malari student's bed. The human was patiently helping her with homework, explaining atmospheric chemistry in simple terms that the plant-like alien could understand. Human Han, Krastor called out quietly, not wanting to stir the other recovering students. Han looked up from the homework tablet, and his familiar bright smile spread across his face. Krastor, how are you feeling? The doctor said your healing ability should have you back to normal very soon. I've been thinking about what happened between us, the Vortak said, carefully lowering his large body onto a medical chair that was built to hold his weight. About how you reacted during my demonstration. Oh, that! Han's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Yes, I've been wanting to thank you. Your hunting techniques gave me several great ideas for my xenobiology research paper. Krastor's elongated head tilted to one side in confusion. You smiled. When Professor Veltharum introduced me as a killer, you smiled. Why did you do that? Han's face became more thoughtful as he considered the question. I think, because I was excited to learn something new. On Earth, we study predators all the time. Human children learn about hunting methods the same way students here learn about physics and math. It's just part of understanding how life works in the universe. But you were not afraid of me, Krastor said. Should I have been afraid? Han asked, seeming genuinely puzzled by the idea. I mean, you weren't hunting me. You were there to teach us. There's a big difference between those two things. Krastor was quiet for a long moment, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing slowly as he processed this. During the attack, when you systematically defeated those soldiers, I realized something important. I am not the apex predator that I believe myself to be. Han looked truly confused by this statement. Of course you are an apex predator. Your species has amazing abilities. The camouflage, the poison, the speed. You're perfectly built for your place in the ecosystem. But you are built for something completely different, Krastor said slowly, choosing his words carefully. You are built to make other predators disappear forever. The words seemed to float in the air between them. Han thought about this with the same intense curiosity that he brought to everything else in his life. I suppose that's one way to think about it, he said after a moment. But I prefer to see it as problem solving. Humans are really good at solving problems, especially when the problem is about staying alive. Krastor's poison sacs under his throat began to pulse with something that could have been respect, fear, or maybe both. He wasn't sure which feeling was stronger. I have asked for permission to sit in on your Earth history classes." "That's wonderful," Han said, his smile returning to full brightness. "Professor Kim will be so happy. Not many students want to learn about comparative evolutionary psychology." The young Malari student in the bed next to them made a small sound of distress. Both Han and Kraz-Tor turned to look at her. Her leaf-like appendages were trembling slightly. "Don't worry, Senna," Han said gently to the plant-like alien. "Kraz-Tor isn't going to hurt anyone. He's part of the rehabilitation program now." But Senna wasn't looking at the reformed assassin with fear. She was looking at Han with the same expression that many students have been wearing lately when they looked at the human exchange student. "Han," she whispered, "during the attack, how did you know what to do?" Han's expression became patient and kind, the way it always did when he was explaining something. Basic problem solving, really. You assess the situation, identify the available resources, predict likely outcomes, and choose the action with the highest probability of success. "But you made it look so easy," Senna said. "Practice," Han replied simply. "Every human learns these skills growing up. You never know when you might need them." Kraz-Tor watched this exchange with growing understanding. The human wasn't bragging or trying to seem dangerous. He was simply explaining basic facts about his species the way someone might explain how to breathe or eat. To Han, systematic problem-solving under life-threatening conditions was as natural as photosynthesis was to Senna. "Fair warning about the Earth history course," Han continued, turning back to Kraz-Tor. "Some of the material can be pretty intense. We'll be covering everything from persistence hunting techniques to the development of cooperative warfare strategies." "Cooperative warfare?" Kraz-Tor asked. "Oh, yes. Humans learned early that working together made us much more effective. One human is dangerous, but a group of humans working together can solve almost any problem." Han's smile remained cheerful and innocent. "It's really fascinating how it all developed." As Kraz-Tor listened to Han talk enthusiastically about human history, a final understanding crystallized in the assassin's mind. Humans didn't smile when faced with danger because they were naive or fearless. They smiled because they had never stopped being the thing that other predators learned to avoid in the darkness. They just did it with such natural friendliness that most beings never realized what they were looking at until it was too late.